I also wanted to ask you, Ella, about another topic entirely, because you wrote a piece on Spike this week about Andrew Tate and the reaction to Andrew Tate. And it got me thinking, because I was speaking to a teacher friend of mine who said that at his school there was a decree that came down from the headmaster saying that the name must not be mentioned among the children because it will radicalise them into misogyny. Yeah. Is that the right way to deal with this? Apparently, according to your article, this is happening quite a lot in schools.
Yeah, well, there was this big article in the Times Education Supplement which was all about how to instruct teachers how to deal with Andrew Tate and the influence of Andrew Tate. And one of the main things was calling for official CPD training for all schools to be able to deal with Andrew Tate. This is just music to this guy's ears. I mean, I know he's in somewhere, remaining in jail somewhere, so he's probably not paying attention to British press, but that's, you know, individuals like Andrew Tate or Julian Blanc before him or any kind of...
And these are influencers who basically...
pick-up artists, they call themselves.
OK, so they're saying to young men, basically, I can teach you how to get women. That's it.
Yeah, but or get rich. It's kind of mainly get rich scheme, and then there's a little bit of sort of make me a sandwich, darling, in the background of it.
OK.
And it's driving me mad how panicked people are about him, because, number one, you know, truth that was forever thus is that 13-year-old boys, which is sort of the main kind of age category that finds him interesting, are generally idiots. I mean, you know, they're like in the nicest way possible.
Yeah,
they're very immature. They, you know, pick up on stuff. They get obsessed with. There's a reason why so many of them are obsessed with gaming and things like that. They get obsessed with things, and it really is not without, you know, outside of the remit of capabilities of adult society to sort of pull the plug on the laptop and say, like, come back into the real world, guys, because any of the things that Andrew Tate says, whether it's the sandwich thing or he's infamous for saying that women can't fly planes, things like that, all you have to do is to put, put that into practice in real life.
Yes.
And maybe say that to a woman, maybe say that to a teenage 13-year-old girl, and see what happens to you when you know,
I suppose their argument is that they would probably agree with you and say that teenage boys are particularly susceptible to influence, and they would say what this is doing is sowing the seeds of misogyny in later life.
Well, there's I think one of the reasons why we're finding it so difficult to get to grips with Andrew Tate, where in previous generations he would have been dismissed outright very quickly.
Yeah.
And people would have got a clip around the ear for saying rude things about women. But the part of the problem is that in sort of today, in relationship and sex education lessons and the way we talk about young men and women's relationships, we give this narrative that young men are inherently born with the desire and ability to hurt and rape young girls, and they're sort of conditioned to that from the get-go, and that young women are weaker, they're more emotional and more in need of protection, and they're sort of inherently different, and there are these vices that need to be managed. And, you know, we say, and teachers say, it's OK because we're going to give you consent classes to train you out of that. Andrew Tate comes along and says, I completely agree. Men are dominant, women are weak. Let me offer you a $500 course on how to harness these inherent things that everybody says you have. So actually, the sort of philosophy behind it is very similar. A consent class teacher and Andrew Tate are almost exactly the same in terms of how they view young men and women, but it's just they have different ways of approaching it. And so we need to start saying, actually, to young people, there's nothing destined or predetermined about you and the way you behave. You have to take agency over your own actions.
So you're sort of arguing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a victim-centred feminism, or a feminism that says, yes, women are weaker and need more protection, that's the wrong way to go about this?
Yeah, it's because, well, number one, it's just not true. There is nothing more terrifying and brilliant than a teenage girl. I mean, really, they're something to behold in terms... I mean, I was one of them once, and I remember how awful and, you know, forthright we were. And there's this weird idea that people sort of melt in classrooms, or that they melt in combat with each other, in conversation with each other. You have teachers reporting, female teachers coming forward and saying, I was literally in tears because one of my 12-year-old year 7 or 8 students said to me that I couldn't fly a plane. That was one of them. And you just think, what's wrong with you? You know, get a grip. And I think if we are saying that watching a YouTube video of this guy who really, like, he exists in a YouTube hole, he makes sense, but in reality, he doesn't make sense. And obviously, he's now accused of various things which will hopefully add to people's young boys' sort of sense of who he really might be. All you have to do in order to combat that, there have been, you know, pop stars, can the Kardashians flaunt their wealth online? There's so much going on for young people to get obsessed with. All you have to do is give them something positive to be interested in. And so I think that he should be talked about in schools. But you don't need CPD training. All you need is a teacher with the confidence to say, what about this loser interests you? Like, what about him do you think is going to make you successful? And just have a conversation in reality, rather than write 7 articles about how terrifying he is and, it's also not a kind of coincidence, I think, that this whole panic is happening at the same time that, for example, lots of politicians are going absolutely mental about the online safety bill at the moment. And there's a snowballing effect of young people are being brainwashed by people online. Really, all we have to do is pull the plug and give them a bit of a kick intellectually and maybe physically and say, get interested in something real.
Ella Whelan, thank you so much for joining me.